any questions? We're coming into our question and answer session now. So for Dr. Amit and Waheeda, if any questions? Rosemary?
Hello again. I actually think that one of the greatest things this group has done is by bringing some of the professionals and some of us, the people who it affects, together. They actually start seeing it's not as somebody who's bullshit, it's our character, but if you've got keratoconus and you have to put up the troubles, you're going to have to be bullshit to survive, mate, with the problems we have. And I think that is one of the great things this group has done. And it also means instead of seeing us a number, or as Waheeda was saying, and I think you're absolutely right, they see us as a long string of complicated numbers and codes. But no, now that some of us have seen us in the group, they know that actually we're the person who has problems with modern computer screens because of the glare, and we drive a pony cart, and we like a nice pint of Guinness, and we support Liverpool in the football club, whatever it is. And that's so much more human than just being all these complicated strings of numbers. Like, for example, if our real problem in life is that we can't read computer screens anymore, so we're going to need the specialist adaptive technology to read the screens out with us. We can't get on the training courses to use the adaptive technology until we've actually been registered partially sighted. Stop trying to give us an extra half a line on the Snellen site and get us registered so we can actually train to use the equipment we need. I've been in that problem for ages and ages myself. And that sort of thing. I mean, and just treat us as humans who can know what the problems are. This is absolutely crazy. One of my hobbies is horses. A few years ago, I had an unruly horse who decided he would rather eat the hedge than stand by the mounting block while I climbed aboard. So he dragged me all along the hedge, and I ended up with scratches all the way up my arm. 3 days later, I had an appointment at Moorfields, still with all the scratches on. I'd even forgotten it by then, because this is life with horses. Somebody at Moorfields must have seen them. Didn't ask me, hey, what happened to you, mate? I sent a letter to the person who I told them was now my ex-GP, wasn't anymore, saying I'd been self-harming and needed his professional help to get me involved with mental health services. I made a formal complaint about that, but that is just totally ridiculous. You know what I mean? So please, we're humans. If you think there's a problem, what's the problem? It's ask us, how does our life affect us? Yeah.
We had that problem only last night. We went to a restaurant. We come up, stayed overnight, and the restaurant was quite dark, and they had very low lights, and it just wasn't suitable for a keratoconus patient. We couldn't see, so we went somewhere else. Anyone else?
So, my keratoconus was managed for many years locally in Portsmouth at a opticians and contact lens centre, and things were going quite happily. And then I needed some new contact lenses, and the cost was something ridiculous. And I contacted, I think it was Anne Quebec that I contacted, and she said, you should really go to your local hospital and get in on the system there, which is what I did. And in due course, it saved me hundreds of pounds because I was then able to get my lenses on the NHS. So now I am going to Southampton. But really, my question is, is that right? If I could be managed sort of locally in a optician's, I am now sort of using up, hospital resources, and things are going on okay now. But any comments on that situation?
I would say you're using your hospital resources, and you should stop doing that immediately. You should. To be honest, if you're able to go locally and you're lucky enough to have a lens that works well for you, I would say that use that service. If it's a lens which is costing a lot of money, and and there are patients, we're in the inner city, Birmingham, and people really struggle to pay for their lenses. So I think that is something you have to judge. You're entitled to that treatment if you have the condition, but if you're lucky enough to go locally, I would say, without causing any embarrassment, have a think about that. Where things start to change, you're welcome to join the system again. So we're good at refitting or trying to get the right lens, but if you've got something that works well and just needs replacing every couple of years, that can be done, locally, or it can be done through the hospital, and perhaps you could have your aftercares locally. So where I tend to see something very different. something very progressive and something very, you know, like the young man was mentioning there, a lot of people were ready to go to university, but their eyes are, you know, causing lots of challenges, and working people. So I think you're one of the lucky ones. So if you're asking me what you should do, I think it's a decision that you have to make.
No, it's done. I mean,
So
I'm now
it's
seeing hospital, but I'm now using up hospital resources, if you like, where in principle I could be treated locally in a, you know, or dealt with locally in a local optician's.
Yes. I think you're being very honest, and I think that it is sort of bothering you. So I think I would just discharge myself. I'd go locally.
I think that is a problem between the private and the NHS. One of the things the Ken Pullen's trying to investigate in the problem of having spare lenses. Because a keratoconus patient, when he loses his lens, her lens, they're useless, they can't work.
I mean, to be honest, where we've reached a point where the lens is fitting well and is stable, I encourage my patients to get a spare lens.
You do?
The one thing I have to say is that they do have to pay for the replacement. And it can't be free of charge. And obviously we have to look at the exemption, etc. So, and certainly around Christmas time, we encourage all our patients to, you know, if they need a replacement, to do that by November, early December, because a lot of the companies are now closing over Christmas. So I think that we want to avoid delays wherever possible.
So you do advise them to pay,
well, the thing
pay
is,
for a spare lens,
there are patients who don't really want to, who only come in to see us sort of once a year or every 6 months, and they kind of understand their eyes well, and they know when the lens will need replacing. And they often discuss about, well, it will need replacing by Christmas, and is it okay if we order it by November, December? And we kind of agree with that. I think genuinely the spare lenses and whether they should be paid for is a separate discussion, a separate argument. Is it sensible if you have a lens and you're relying on it? And I know patients, and I know there's Katie sitting in the back where, you know, she always, her lenses fell out a lot, and then the spares are a lifeline. So if you're able to afford it, have a spare lens, you know, and have that as a backup.
So the facility is there within the NHS to pay for a spare lens?
We would charge the NHS price for a spare lens. So we can't issue a lens at no price.
No,
okay?
but do you charge full price? Or?
No, we have a standard NHS price. And for example, if a lens costs £200, the NHS charge will still be £57. So if you have a contact lens and you wanted a spare lens, because you said, you know, Waheeda, I really need one, I would say if you can pay £57, we will order a spare one for you.
Oh, you can do that?
Absolutely,
I didn't think that was possible.
No, I think it's actually a sensible thing to do.
Right, I thought that was...
No, not at all. Absolutely, I would encourage it. And the issue, I think, is where people don't pay for their lenses, okay? And then they want a spare one, because then, David, you have to be fair to everybody, and it's simply not possible. But you can order a spare lens, and anyone whose eyes are stable, I would encourage that, you know, it's good to have a spare lens. Make sure it doesn't dry up completely in this case. Change the solution fairly regularly, or don't just leave it in the case. Swap and change, start using it. But it's a good idea. Yes, we're more than happy to order a replacement lens.
All right.
And I moved out of the area a couple of years ago and asked to be referred to a hospital local to my new home, which turned out to be a very big mistake, because the consultant at that hospital had a very different opinion on my contact lens fit. They didn't have such a big department, and I was referred for my contact lenses to a high street optician with some expertise. I went through a horrific 6 or 8 months where I was visiting this optician every 2 weeks. He couldn't get a suitable contact lens fit. He had a lot of high-tech equipment, and he was showing us how well the lens fit, and it did give us good vision. But every time he tried, after 2 weeks, I was in absolute agony, ended up in A&E quite a few times with just not enough oxygen getting to my eye. So I actually begged my GP to refer me back to Birmingham, and I'm again having perfect fit with my contact lenses. So if yours are good where you are, I certainly wouldn't change to something more local.
And you have that right, don't you, to be referred somewhere else, don't you?
Yes.
You can be referred anywhere.
Yeah, so I would just like to thank Waheeda for all the years of wonderful care at Birmingham Midland Eye Centre.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. Any other questions? Over here.
I just want to ask you, I've been a contact lens wearer for a long time, and I've been suffering from keratoconus for nearly 30, 40 years now. What I wanted to check with you was, when you gave the presentation today, there are some things that have come out that I was not aware of. So what would you say to someone who wanted to have a one-off appointment with yourselves, just to make sure that your local, the people who are treating me are doing the right, are in the right lines?
My advice would be that you speak to whoever is managing your condition, okay, and perhaps talk to them first if you have any concerns. Now, you see, this is a presentation, and I'm standing here quite relaxed. If I knew there was a list of patients, you would kind of see a very rushed, person, and it would be a different kind of a communication. So there's lots of information being given out. What we do is we give out an information sheet with things written down, and there's also a keratoconus information sheet, and I know Amit's mentioned one for his hospital as well. So there should be an information sheet where you are. It's difficult just to sort of see it, because we have a formal process of seeing people, and it's really for a consultation, just to, and again, I would advise that you speak to perhaps one of the colleagues in the group and see what concerns that you have. If your eyes are being managed well, and you just feel it's the information side that's perhaps lacking, I think that you can address that through them, where it's a slightly difficult one, and I have to refer this one to Professor Rubinstein, one of my mentors. I knew I needed, Martin's help at some point. So it's a difficult one where someone just wants information. It's because we have the process where you would see someone for a consultation. And in fairness, I wouldn't just be, especially if someone's not a patient, this is a very different forum. It's a difficult area, isn't it?
It's a second opinion, really, isn't it? It's just
I suppose if it's a referral and a second opinion, that's fine. We'd be more than happy to see you. So I must have misunderstood. I felt that it was just sort of a chat about, within the hospital. Here, I'm more than happy to talk to you, but formally through the hospital process, where you're under one hospital, you need a referral and we can assess you again, or I'm happy to talk to you today. I think I might have misunderstood the question. So.
I don't know.
Quickly, you've also mentioned problems with people buying them on the internet and when is the NHS actually going to consent to give us our prescriptions so that we can take them and get our own, if that's easier?
Sorry, what's this? What are we talking about?
For contact lenses, people, you've said, I don't know whether this is soft ones or piggybacking.
To be honest with you, Rosemary, that's the question that all these hospital managers ask, and they would love it if I could give everybody a prescription and then the patient would not come back to the hospital again. And that's where, and that's, that's what everybody wants. The question is really, some contact lenses, it's about payment. If you're able to see somebody in the community and pay for the service, you can be, so it's all about payment. So is there anywhere else you can take the prescription? So unless I've...
Sorry, can I just finish?
Sorry.
For example, I used to piggyback.
Yes.
I had a spell once where I couldn't get any replacement piggybacking lenses because Moorfields didn't know whether to charge me or not, so they wouldn't give them to me. I could have got a set of them for about half the price of an NHS prescription charge for a contact lens from Asda, but Asda wouldn't give them to me without the prescription, and Moorfields wouldn't give me the prescription. That is daft.
Okay, I don't know what the situation is at Moorfields, but certainly I've got patients who feel that, the thing about piggybacks is that they do have incredible dangers. And if you're lucky enough to have comfortable lens wear, consider yourself lucky, because the lenses can tighten up, they can cause problems, and there are lots of very cheap lenses on the market. If you have a certain lens, if one of my patients came and said, I've got this lens and I've tried it, I'm being honest, it fits very well, I would look at the fitting. And, I don't have a view that it's only the soft lens that I provide that's suitable. I'm happy to look at other options, but the main thing is you need someone to look at the fit of that lens. Now, it's a question of whether, as a hospital, I'm happy to look at a fit that you've purchased. it's a very grey area because patients can swap and change lenses and look at various, when we have certain manufacturers that we use where we know how the lenses work, how they work within a piggyback design. It's not simply a question of getting a disposable lens. So it's a very difficult area, and it's not quite as easy as just issuing a prescription. So I think that it's difficult to comment on your case. You would need to sort of talk to them, but if there's a lens that you feel fits very well and you take the details along and maybe talk to, to talk to them and see if there's anything they can do to help.
Yeah, in this particular case, it wasn't the fit. It was that the contact lens clinic weren't sure whether they ought to be charging me an NHS prescription charge for the soft lenses for piggybacking or not. So they couldn't give me authorise me to supply them because I didn't know whether they had to charge me, and they wouldn't give me the prescription so I could get them from somewhere else either. It was completely daft now to get my MP involved, but it wasn't the fit.
Are you forbidden for giving a prescription, or can you?
I think that the main thing is if you give a prescription, you need. When we're discharging patients, we issue a prescription, or when we're doing a handover, we need someone to look after the eye. Okay, so when you give a prescription, sometimes patients will disappear for a year or 2 years and you don't know what's going to happen to that prescription. If someone's going to buy a contact lens over the internet and they have keratoconus, then I personally wouldn't allow that because there are lots of dangers. When we provide a lens within the hospital, we have a duty of care to look after the eye. The consequences of what that lens does to the eye are our responsibility, and that's what we're checking. Now, if patients are buying lenses, the chances are that they won't attend their appointments or they'll be lost in the system. We don't know exactly what they're buying. Now, when contact lenses come into the hospital, we actually check each lens. So when the order's written out, there's a person who signs and checks it, an optometrist. When a lens comes in, they sign and check it. When we put a lens in the eye, we check that it's okay. So I think where we give prescriptions to buy lenses on the internet is actually fraught with problems, and certainly I'm very against it, to be honest.
That was a really clear talk, very, very good. Thank you very much. You remind me, actually, when I spoke to my surgeon after about 20 years, he said, I can't remember you, I can't remember your name, he said, but I never forget an eye. I never know. But what do you do when you've only got half an hour and you haven't got to the end of your assessment? What do you advise the patient? I suppose you just got to make a decision at the end. Is there anywhere else the patient can go?
I think that, to be honest, when we're fitting a new lens, that's kind of quite stressful in the sense that then time is limited, and that's where you have to, and that's the way we work at BMEC is, and I know patients complain, oh, sorry, I've just remembered the point I wanted to make, completely off subject. I think that people sometimes want to see the most senior person or the most experienced person. Don't. My advice would be see the juniors because they are really, really thorough. We have 2 new starters, and one young lady said, oh, can you come and have a look at this cornea? There's a staining at the top. And I'd seen this patient, and I hadn't seen any staining before. And I had a look, and I said, well, I can't see anything. And she said, well, no, if you turn the magnification to times 40 and look right up there. And when I turned the magnification up high, which I never do, and I looked right up there, there was a little tiny scratch mark. And I thought, well, you're very thorough. So I would say that, with the juniors, do see them. You will get a better service, honestly. Whereas if you've seen the patient time and time again, you kind of feel you know the eye and this is the best. So I would encourage you to see different people. And the point I wanted to make, David, is we have a different skill mix. So the new contact lenses are fitted by the seniors or the most experienced. And they are, very experienced at managing that. And the normal way around it is you're not going to get everything done in an hour or half an hour unless you're very detached. And I think those kind of individuals don't survive in the NHS. What you tend to do is see patients between other individuals. So what I say to people is, look, are you able to wait? I'll quickly call my next patient in and then I carry on. So you try to do as much as you can. Now, if on the follow-up appointment there is a problem, what we have is contact lens refit appointments, which are specifically to deal with those problems. So it does mean there's a bit of a wait. So in terms of the refitting, it is a struggle, and we found that people were being brought back and people were just being added onto the waiting list again and again. So we have a special list where if things are not completed, and usually things are not completed because there's some difficulty, either the eye is not responding in the way we were hoping, so we then sort of make sure a senior person sees them, which is a contact lens refit appointment.
Oh, interesting.
Okay.